I propose a new vitally important statistic for games of rugby union. In the hours leading up to a match, box-faced God King Antoine Dupont likes to nap. His theory is, the better his nap, the more relaxed he feels. The more relaxed he feels, the better he plays. As far as secrets to their success goes, a world-beating genius powered by dozing off could only be more French if he shagged a baguette beforehand to make him weary. Never mind dominant tackles and speed of ball generated. The new stat I want measured for every game France play is how long Antoine Dupont sleeps for and what woke him up, because last Sunday's close-fought encounter with Ireland felt more like a fever dream than the kind of clean, rejuvenated sleep France would have hoped for, as the two teams put in the kind of performances that were more interesting than captivating. France ultimately coming out on top despite Ireland pulling their greatest attacking move of the Andy Farrell era. So, how did France claim the spoils in Dublin for the first time in 10 years, and in the 100th test match between these two teams? After 2 games this year, it's hard to tell where Ireland are at in 2021, but it's very easy to tell what kind of side they are. Ireland are like the physical manifestation of the kind of hypothetical rugby pub conversation that follows World 15, but you can only pick one player from each country. If you had a team who were all absolutely 5 out of 10 bang average in all areas except 2, where they would be arguably the best in the world, what would those 2 attributes be? So, Ireland have comfortably the best line-out in the Six Nations, and probably are the best at the breakdown in the competition, yet everything else is super kinda meh. It's like Andy Farrell decided to overcompensate for his rugby league background by min-maxing his team in favour of the 2 most important attributes you don't have in Wigan ball. So far this Six Nations, Ireland have lost possession on only 1 of their own line-outs and stolen as many against the throw as England, Scotland, Italy and France put together. And then, at the breakdown, they're simply the most efficient team out there. They've won almost double the number of turnovers of the next closest team, but it's on their own ball that they're really, really smart. My mantra on this channel is any time in a game of rugby you cheat and you don't get caught, you've done really well there. And by that metric, Ireland's work at the breakdown is phenomenal. This is Ireland's longest period of possession in the first half, if we include both sides of the kick, and virtually on every phase, the Irish clearer enters through the gate, on his feet, totally legally. Then, once the immediate French threat is taken care of, they flop and seal off the ball. No referee, especially one for the empathy for the game of Luke Pearce, who is outstanding, will ever penalise this. The Irish player doesn't commit an offence until after it's no longer a contest, but in doing so, they make sure it won't become one again. It's like most penalties at the breakdown are given for robbing banks, but what Ireland are doing is tax evasion. It's still illegal and gaining them the same amount of money, but because the money entered their account legally, a blind eye is turned to activities beyond there. A bit like, say, a health secretary unlawfully handing out contracts to his friends and qualify the jobs they're doing for well above the asking price, squandering billions of pounds of public money in order to profit over a global pandemic. Every now and again, Ireland do get caught, but they get away with this kind of shit so often it's worth sucking it up once or twice for very limited consequences and just carrying on gaming the system. Very quickly, France clocked onto how efficient Ireland were on their own ball and could have stopped competing. Whereas a Sean Edwards defence would normally throw someone into the ruck, on this lengthy Irish attack, designated shithouse Bernard Leroux is the only French player to consider attacking the ball, and even then, he's just making himself a nuisance rather than trying to win it. As such, Irish form is squeaky clean. It's now 1,000% legal. France having all but given up on the idea of turning over Ireland. Dominance at line-out and breakdown combined with a solid scrum granted Ireland almost unlimited possession. However, this is where the min of the min-maxing comes in, because Ireland seemingly had no idea what to do with it. With the exception of the one incredible, phenomenal, brilliant, really good set move that we'll get onto, Ireland's attack is simply very predictable. It's not bad, it's just obvious. There's no real deception, even when Ireland do run what coaches call a screenplay, which just refers to any move where a back is receiving the ball behind a screen of forwards such as this. It's easy to read. France are watching these 3 forwards, knowing any of them could carry, but instead Henderson swizzles round to pass to Keenan. Normally, the idea of a screenplay is to let the guy out the back, distribute wider and allow the backs to pick new lines the defence now drawn in. Here, France are already watching Ringrose and Lowe. The threat wide in those 2 players never changes. It would just be a different dude passing to them. Keenan considers throwing that ball, but Lowe would just be bundled into touch because he's already being marked. So the fullback has to take it in himself and gets pretty much caught on the gain line. Instead of being a fresh new way to unleash an attack, for Ireland, screenplays are just another way to crash it up. So Ireland then revert to plan A and hang a high ball to land just outside the 22, so the opposition can't call for a free kick. This, by Gibson Park, is a good kick. It forces Doolan to cover a huge amount of ground to reach it, and there's plenty of chases in realistic position to follow up. And Ireland do regather, but the fundamental flaw of this tactic is you'll only ever get up to the edge of the 22, which is pretty much where Ireland have been camped the entire last 2 games. Good kicking and 2 outstanding means of claiming the ball will get you up to about here, but then they really struggle to go any further. There's just a lot of mincing about, gaining and losing the same 5 metres directly either side of this line over and over again. They did manage to make some headway once, other than with the incredible move, as they parrot the play Marika Korobetti scored off against the All Blacks in October last year. 12 takes the ball, 10 loops him, and the winger runs round 2 to distract them. However, whereas Hunter Paisami here manages to body his opponent and prevent them drifting, Arthur Vincent, an outstanding defender, is buying none of it, and steps Ringrose right as he's about to hit him. Guru Rari tries to pull him in, but Vincent's having none of it, and can pressure Burns. This means Penno no longer has to, so can drift wide to cover Keenan, and hence allowing Dulon to watch Lowe. His hit isn't comprehensive, but it's ultimately enough to put Lowe over the touchline and save the try. International rugby is won by tight margins, and Arthur Vincent allowing his 2 outside defenders just a split second more to adjust by not falling for Ireland's ploy might have just saved his side the game, even the championship. However, I haven't yet covered Ireland's truly outstanding, really good move. It's a genius ploy, clearly cooked up by the same brain and brawn that made Owen Farrell. It's a brilliant bit of rugby that led to their try on the weekend. It's a play called losing a line out. Ireland's best attacking move of the Six Nations so far was the time they lost a line out and the ball bounced quite nicely for Ronan Kelleher, who could run it in from 20 metres. If they'd won that line out, Ireland probably would have spent some more time faffing about the 22 before, conceding a turnover or kicking it away or doing whatever. But this move, genius. No one saw it coming. Absolute genius. There is something to be said for the contradiction at the heart of Ireland, which is that they're a team who seem to want structure. They want to be playing a very controlled game. But the best stuff we've seen from them in these 2 games has been when they've embraced chaos. Their tries came off a bouncing ball and Henshaw ripping up the script because their called move wasn't going to work anymore. And stuff like this is very similar. Ireland essentially doing hands down the line like they're an under-8s team before Ringrose, who for me is the only Irish back who has improved his line chance the last 2 weeks, cuts back and finds a little hole to burst the game line. Ireland look their best when they rip shit up rather than just playing the way Farrell and Cat want them to. And either they have to lean into that and try and create more chaotic situations, or their structure are going to change drastically if they want to win multiple games this championship, considering England their only remaining home game. With Italy especially now an exciting attacking team powered by Grand Slam 2028 mastermind Paolo Garbisi, Ireland have comfortably the weakest attack in the championship this year, entirely reliant on, that one amazing attacking move. They've now played 2 of their 5 games and are yet to score a try that would have come in any way from the coaches, be it a strike move or from the designated game plan. That's concerning. When asked after the match if he was looking at the bigger picture by a journalist clearly referring to the World Cup, Farrell responded by saying, of course he's looking at the bigger picture. He's got to have an eye on the games against Italy, Scotland and England. It's kind of hard with that in mind to use the excuse both Eddie Jones and Wayne Pivac pulled last year after the attack faltered, that they're going to build on it in order to peak in 2023. If I were Italy, I'd be putting a very heavy focus on territory this week, because if you can keep this Ireland team away from your 22, they should be containable. And Italy's defence this Six Nations has been far better across the first 70 metres than it is over the last 15, where they still have a tendency to crumble when someone gets near their line. All of this remains in contrast to the 2 French tries, both showing some lovely signs of Antoine Dupont being rather well rested. Off fresh line-out ball, Jalabert creeps close before popping Fickou onto the crash ball. This has 2 purposes. 1, take CJ Sander, Ireland's best tackler, out of the game. Whereas most moves target the weakest tacklers first phase, France want to do the opposite and mean they have softer shoulders to target next up. 2, it creates a blindside that forces the Irish forwards to fold halfway across the pitch very, very quickly. As such, Henshaw and Van der Fleer are still taking position as the first wave of French runners come at them. Dupont throws a really precise dummy, shaping a tiny flick into Jalonge, and Ireland consider it just long enough to buy Jalabert more time. He never even looks at Dulon outside him, just always watching the defence instead. Henshaw is likewise only looking at Jalabert, and he can reach his arm through to offload before him or Van der Fleer can make the tackle, drawing both and putting Marchand into space. Burns, the softest Irish shoulder, is the guy covering, which means Marchand, the far bigger man, is in control of the tackle and can time his offload to Dupont, who breaks on through. Then it just throws this absolutely disgusting slingshot to Penaud. This not only allows Penaud to drag Ireland close to the line, but means Dupont himself isn't on the floor, which would slow French ball down as they look to spin it out. 6 players come in to act as a screen, but France know what has to be done. Realising he's too flat and Ireland now have more numbers, Fickou begins to fade wide before the ball is given, as it'll allow him to get on the outside of Ruddock and skip the majority of the defence. Fickou is hoping Jalibert will read him and understand this, and he kind of half does. Jalibert adjusts his pass as he's throwing it, and the result is a bounce pass, which still reaches its intended target, and hence allows Fickou to get on the outside of Ruddock and force Gibson Park to bite in. Olivon is then so close to Fickou he could catch COVID from him, and takes the offload to cross for a really well-worked try. Damien Penaud's try, however, was almost the opposite. The French phase play is really nice and nicely put together by Dupont, putting pressure on Ireland, and whilst you suspect they could crack at any moment, the breakthrough itself is odd because it's both a fluke and a pattern at this point. Twice in many weeks, we've seen a first-rate defence broken by a simple switch back to the blind side. Because modern defences are so intricate, they often only press properly on the side where the ball is coming out, and the other isn't really needed. We saw the All Blacks try to exploit this in the World Cup by deliberately running a phase into the middle of the field, so they had Ruck set up right in the centre, before passing out to the 10 on one side who would cross-kick to the other side. And they had, mixed levels of success in that. But here, it's quite simple for Jalibert to spot and improvise after Dupont fixes the forward watching him and takes him out. One wide pass coaxes the king of biting in, James Lowe, out to play, and almost allows Dulon through himself, but he drops it off nicely to Penaud wrapping round, who does a classic touch rugby finish. I love this, it's a delight to see. In touch, players are coached to dive as low as possible with the ball out in front of them, fully outstretched, as the upright nature of most tackles means nobody can realistically stop you scoring in that position. I have no idea if Penaud has a touch rugby background, but, I'm going to say he has, and say, hey, it's always nice to see. Despite playing a chunky role in both tries, Sunday's Antoine Dupont looked like he maybe suffers from restless leg syndrome, partly because it would have ruined his nap, and partly because he couldn't stop kicking that ball away, could he, man? Now, I take responsibility, as we kind of all have to for this, but the guy has been the best player on the planet for more than a year now, but there was some showiness to his play that suggested a fallibility we've never seen from him before, as though he's beginning to believe his own hype. This is just pointless showmanship. Dupont trying something flash that was never going to be on, but the fact France still kind of makes some ground off this shows just why Dupont remains the best player on the planet. Despite having his most questionable game in at least 2 years, there were no errors by Dupont. Even the stuff that he got wrong, broadly speaking, went quite well. A few of his decisions to kick were questionable, but the kicks themselves were excellent and piled pressure on Ireland in the later stages. After a turnover, France have 4 players against 3 Irish who are at varying levels of onside, but instead of passing or even looking to thread the grubber, which would have been nice and would have worked, Dupont only looks at the backfield. This is off his wrong foot and super awkward for Lowe to cover. Lowe knocks on, and whilst France will never know if this was a try-scoring chance, they've gained about 20 metres. And then we have the quote-unquote classic mistake that most of us will remember, which is actually a product of more great work by the most dynamic man to ever look like a bedside cabinet. Les Bleus run another 2-phase move off the line-out as they drop second row Leroux into the back line to clear out Aldrit's carry. Quickly, once again aimed right at CJ Stander's shoulder. Fastball generated, Dupont picks and goes and engages the forwards on the fringe of the ruck. As they're clearing out, France put so many runners in Robbie Henshaw's face. Penaud is picking this line that's potentially very clever, and a pod of forwards about to fly in his face altogether, almost guaranteeing a huge carry for France. He calls in Van der Fleer to give him a hand, and nobody notices Julien Marchand, who just flies through the gap Van der Fleer creates by trying to help out Henshaw. Nobody noticed Julien Marchand has been a real theme of the last year, as the French hooker was far and away man of the match for me in that game on Sunday, and yet once again nobody seemed to come up talking about how bloody good he was. And that's pretty much been the way ever since Guillaume Guirado gave up the shirt to try and keep his blood pressure below 200. Marchand's been consistently fantastic for Gautier's France, and no one seems to talk about him. So Marchand burst the line, and the French team either rush into or around the ruck or set wide, except for Arthur Vincent, who plots himself perfectly, once again, between the guards and Ringrose, who begins to rush up. Vincent's line is perfect. Dupont recognises this. He throws the ball to... No, what are you doing? What are you doing? Paul Willemse, a man with the intelligence of a bedside cabinet, sticks his enormous face in the way and heads the ball into the advertising hoardings, which then gives him a great chance to say one of his 6 words on the ref mic. At the time I shouted, God, Willems is a donkey, and I think I stand by that. It all feeds into a performance by Antoine Dupont that suggested he maybe only got 34 winks. Now, I have no idea whether anyone outside the UK, or even across the whole UK, knows the phrase 40 winks meaning a nap, but there's no doubt a bit more was going on in the French camp than winking and nudging this week, as they re-emerged from the break week with enough positive tests to give their fixture list to make it negative test, as their game against Scotland has found itself now called off, and me having to quickly re-record this whole thing. However, Ireland will still travel to Rome, boosted by the return of jiggery pokery sexery tokery for a match they cannot take for granted, yet may present the perfect opportunity to work on that attack, because much as we need a stat to track Dupont's naps, it feels like we need another to help us work out just when Ireland are going to wake up. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. There are videos on all the Six Nations games so far now on the channel. There will be ones on the 2 games now being played this weekend to go on. Congratulations to Just Put the Tip in, who is top of the Fantasy League this week. Congratulations very much. Thank you to everyone that's taken part in that. Thank you to everyone supporting the channel on Patreon. Makes a huge difference. But I know mostly you're still hanging about because you want to see a video of Antoine Dupont doing some construction work. So here it is.
Quand il ne brille pas sur les terrains de rugby, Antoine Dupont s'occupe autrement pendant ses jours de repos. On le retrouve au milieu des briques, dans cette maison qu'il vient d'acheter à Toulouse.